Okay, let's go. I am excited to introduce Andy Siemer and Eric Hexter today. We are going to be talking today about what engineering teams need to be thinking about when it comes to AI, but also what leaders and business leaders need to be thinking about. So Andy Siemer is the co-founder and CEO of Inventive. He's got 20 plus years rescuing broken systems and transforming legacy platforms. He's also an former Army Ranger and turned firefighter, turned CEO. So it's really the same mission every time: execute flawlessly under pressure. And Inventive is in its 10th year. And Eric is a sitting CTO at Aliya Financial Technologies. He has a decade of startup CTO leadership, Fortune 500 chief architect across manufacturing and finance. Before that, author, patented fintech, machine learning, and relevant for today, he's been building AI agent teams in production, not just in demos. So I wanted to start off the conversation about, what are you seeing across the board? And what do you think some of our non-technical clients are saying?
Well, I think it's an interesting question. I don't know that our non-technical clients are seeing what we see. We do see some of our customers playing with AI, and playing with AI means something different to everybody at the moment. But I do find that a lot of them go to a certain point and then stop because it's still a little bit more technical than they would probably like it. But I think the better question is, what are our technical clients seeing? And they're super excited by everything. They're moving super fast. They're probably not paying as close attention as we might be. As far as, what are the side effects of moving super fast? And that's kind of where Eric and I are spending a lot of time, is how fast can I go, but in a manner that is safe, secure, delivering scalable quality code that can be supported for the long-term future in an efficient way that doesn't blow through a gazillion tokens and cost an arm and a leg. I'll let Eric go.
No, absolutely. And I think for the company I represent, the business side of my company is non-technical, and they're saying we need to use agents. We need to get smarter, faster, and do it without hiring more people, right? But the how, the CEO says use agents, and everyone at each discipline is like, what does that mean? I'm uploading documents. So I think the non-technical side, there's a lot of trying to figure out what being agentic means. And then to Andy's point, I've really been focused on the technical side. How can we use this technology to meet those business goals? How can we be faster, deliver more quality without hiring an army of 100 engineers, which is typically every place I've been in the past, that has been the answer. How can we throw more people at it? And we know that's never the answer as well.
And you guys have been orchestrating a lot of systems right now. So maybe talk about how you're using the concepts that you know about with hiring more engineers and making the systems work for you in a orchestrated way.
You want me to?
Well, I think
So I was going to say, I played CTO role or tech lead or, save the team role over and over throughout my career. And there's been times when I get to hire the team from scratch. And with that, I get to interview and kind of get the right disciplines and people with the right practices going in. But using AI and kind of building these agentic teams has been more similar to, hey, here's a team. They're not really delivering great. Go in and help them. So it's trying to figure out, okay, if you're playing the role of developer, what does done mean to you? The whole agile done, which means, the code compiles, you've tested it locally, you've written tests, you've pushed it up to CI, and then tests have run there, and then we've seen it deploy to an environment. An agent or an LLM writing code doesn't think that's what done is. It thinks it just finished the code and it might have compiled. So I have to take these same practices and put the right gates in for the AI to make sure it completes all of the steps. And that's how I think we now need to orchestrate a team and not just try to use one agent harness like Claude or or open code or a codex, something like that, because without having the right guardrails in place, it will kind of do a lot of times what a human will do. What is the easiest thing I can do to call this complete?
I've been having so much fun watching the conversation between the two of you as you wrangle these systems. So Andy, can you talk about some of the missteps that you've seen where it went off the rails?
Well, I think the dilemma we're having is all of the conversations we have about agents is treat them as though they're new hires. So they may be super brilliant, but they don't know how to do things your way. So you got to give them one task, make sure they do that one task. But where it's a little bit different from treating them like humans is I have never hired a human that will go implement a feature and while implementing that feature, completely eradicate everything around it without telling you. It's like, I built this thing and I tore down these 5 other things, but I didn't know that those were important. So you almost have to give it even more guardrails, the same guardrails, but then more guardrails on top of that. So I think right now the running conversation is don't ask an agent to do math because they suck at doing math. You still kind of have to watch the dialogue of this thing as it's thinking through whatever problem it's solving. An example of what I saw was I'm working with Claude. Claude built my whole environment. It should, in theory, understand that this container has a database in it, and that's where our data is. But then I'm watching it implement a feature, and there's apparently an issue with the container, couldn't talk to the database. So Claude, being all powerful, is like, oh, no problem. I'll just go build a new database over here. And only because I happen to be watching its knowledge stream across the screen did I happen to see that. What would have happened had I not been looking is everything just works. The test probably would have worked. Everything would have been great. And somewhere later, I would have found now I've got 2 databases, one in a container, one not in a container. And that's the hard thing that I think even the most junior person just wouldn't do. So that's kind of the running dilemma is the slash and burn.
And Eric, you're in a more regulated environment. So you've got to really think through or test and, as I think you guys say, sandbox these things before.
Yeah. So I mean, and we've seen with the rise of OpenClaw and all these tools, which is like, don't give them full admin access to everything. So yeah, I've been going down the route of setting up virtual machines that are like don't have any logins to anything, and setting them up there so they have free reign on the VM, but there's no saved credentials. So it's kind of sandbox that way. But yeah, from my side, that's where I started looking at, okay, can I orchestrate this team, either using GitHub issues or Jira, because at the end of the day, our SOC audits, everything else still has to get tied back to auditable, traceable things. The check-ins need to tie back to those issues. And it really helps because as the human reviewing everything, I can actually go back and see, okay, yeah, this is what they thought. This is a design they put in there. So it's a little more overhead, right? If I was trying to save every penny I could on tokens, I wouldn't want them to waste the time documenting what they're doing, but I want to know what they're doing. I want to make sure it's right. So from that side, it's very helpful. But from the regulated side, it doesn't matter who or what develops the code. It still needs to follow the processes that are in place. So yeah, it costs a little more, but I think it's totally worth it. At least up until this point, it has been.
So, as you're talking with fellow CTOs or VPs of engineering, and they're trying to figure out, where their company needs to sit or how to advise their senior leadership, what should they be asking or asking themselves on top of advising their executive teams?
I think the resounding feedback is using AI to do development is 100% worthwhile. We are finding we're having to push a little bit more. So pushing our engineers and other folks involved in the project to learn more and do it more quickly. That's one stream. But then the other side, I think, which Eric kind of alluded to, the CEO said we must. We've already seen side effects of that. I don't recall, I think it was Amazon, but one of the big tech companies basically had an edict, you will use our IDE with our integrated AI. at least 80% of the time. And so good employees are going to do what they're told, and they just started using the tool and burned down their entire cloud environment and wasted lots of money. So the other side of the coin is don't push too hard without understanding what you're asking for, and without understanding that there still has to be guardrails in place, at least the normal developer rules that we would have. So testing locally, integrating, running CI/CD, all these basic things that we like to do. But not all developers do them. Younger developers seem like they have gotten away from those habits. So if they don't do those habits for themselves, they're not going to do it with AI. So you need to make sure you have the right team to push on.
So the promise of this productivity increase of 100x is really not true, I'm hearing.
Yeah, that's a hard one, right? I think it's somewhere between 1x, and I think Stripe's, right? Stripe's probably the one company that's like, hey, we land 1,300 PRs a week through our agentic framework, and it's not developers doing chats within their IDE, right? It's a system. It's more like some of the things Andy and I've been working on. So yeah, I think it probably fits closer to the 1.5 to maybe 3x some days. Yeah.
Well, I think the safe way to answer that is depends on how you implement it. So if you're just going to have a non-technical person vibe code their way into a product, it will feel like you're going maybe not 100x, but you're definitely going, well, and specifically a non-technical person is doing technical work, and they're doing 100x because they couldn't have done it beforehand. And so now they're able to do it, but they also don't know the blast radius of the problems that they're causing. So you see leaked social security numbers, credit cards, all that kind of stuff. But even with a team that is technical, like myself, I'm driving a tool to do the thing. I've done this thing for a long time, and I feel like I'm super productive today, and then I'm fixing everything that broke tomorrow. And then I'm super productive the next day, and I'm fixing everything I broke the next day. And so where we've been from a testing perspective is how far can a developer get working with the tool? Cool. We got a certain distance. We found problems. Next thing that we're seeing is how far can a developer get with a developer framework between them and the tool. So now I'm spending a lot more tokens, but I've got a lot more guardrails. It takes longer. So I'm going faster, but I'm not going 100 times faster. But I'm still fixing things that get broken tomorrow. So we're trying to figure out where those things are. Where can I safely go fast? Probably in a greenfield environment, probably not in a brownfield environment. And then, how do we go faster? I think where Eric and I are looking at now is agent orchestration. Depending on, you build your own framework, you use a tool like Paperclip, you have a lot more agents in place. Those agents have very strict rules and responsibilities. There's lots of gatekeeping between them. There's lots of checks from a testing perspective. So the more of that I put in, I'm still going faster, but I'm definitely not going 100 times faster unless we pour more money into the game.
Eric, do you have anything to add to that? Or
no, I think I totally agree. Yeah, well said.
So maybe let's riff on the kind of the ladder of human plus LLM or human plus skills plus LLM. What are the levels that people need to be thinking about that they can achieve? Whereas, maybe they're at level 1 through 3, whereas, you're operating more like 5 or 6 levels up.
Yeah. I think the way I see that, especially with non-technicals, hey, I'm using, instead of going to Google, I go to a chat and I ask it some questions, and it does some web searches, and it comes back and it kind of synthesizes a bunch of queries. And now, hey, that is way better than going to Google and looking at the first 2 links on the page. And that's like probably the most basic level of, okay, I'm able to do some things a little faster, get some research, but it's not targeted. It doesn't really know much about what I'm doing or the reasons why. Then I think you get the level of kind of moving, you're using the tools, it has some memory, whether it's ChatGPT or Claude or any of the other ones, and I'm making projects, and I'm now starting to upload some of my documents about the projects I'm working on or my business, and I'm able to now use that to pull information out that's relevant, right, to what we're doing, to specific projects or things like that. I think that's still kind of that to me is still like the most basic level. I'm able to work a little faster and I'm seeing some productivity, but then you kind of get into, okay, until I can have the agents or the AI perform actions, right? Using tools, using MCPs, using kind of, it's either making something for me. So in code, it's making code, or it's helping with presentations, or it's actually synthesizing, let's say transcripts from a call. That's when you're starting to see, okay, it's actually doing more for me. And I think those are kind of like the basic levels. Once you go past that, now it's like, are we building the right data stores and consolidating data so to make it smarter, right? Kind of the second brain concept, or you're kind of going down where we've been going with agent orchestrations, which is we're kind of taking off all the controls of that first few steps, and now we're able to generate code, generate requirements, generate content, kind of do the things where we're really seeing actual productivity. And what I mean by that is, I didn't have to go write a blog post, or I didn't have to go, generate some marketing stuff or code, or, whatever the discipline is. I think that creation of something is really where the promise of AI kind of lands.
To simplify, I would say that on one end, the human is driving the goal and the strategy and using AI as a tool. Go do this task, go do this task. And on the other end, we're giving AI the goal and allowing it to come up with a strategy, and it's driving all of its outputs, and it will periodically check back, hey, is this what you wanted? And then you can do more interactions. But in that scenario, it's like, go achieve this business goal for me, this development goal, build this massive set of features. And it's fascinating because once you get to that point and you trust, you literally can achieve that state that everybody sees online, where it's like, I gave it a whole product concept, and then I went to the movies and I came back and it was done, or I went to bed and woke up and it was done. There's still lots of course correcting in there. There's problems where it may get hung up because it really wants to achieve the goal, and it may spend all your money and blow out all your credits in the effort of doing that. But when it works, it's like, oh, wow. From creating presentations to building products to, we're at a point now, I always describe my success of trying to automate my personal jobs at Inventive. I spend a lot of time on the sales side, having dialogues with customers, synthesizing what they're telling us, filling in the gaps as an architect to figure out what it would actually take to build the project, putting together, here's what I heard, then putting together a presentation and statements of work, and all that I don't do anymore. I basically take all the inputs and it builds all the outputs, and I just kind of make sure it's the right thing still. And I feel like that's a thing that we can all do. You just have to learn how these Legos fit together.
Yeah. And so maybe let's get really practical about what you're actually building. And our ultimate goal is to help our clients think differently, or potential clients think differently about how they should approach these systems, and when they can DIY, and when it's time to bring in others who can help support them. And Andy, as you mentioned, kind of things can go off the rails quickly, and you need some orchestration and some oversight. So, tell us what you're doing, Eric, with AI agent teams and what you're building.
Yeah, so earlier we mentioned, hey, it's great for greenfield, not great for brownfield. I got brownfield, so and that's the problem I have. So that's the problem I have to figure out. So, I'm spending I'm kind of taking it from, okay, let me build kind of like a small team or department, and then I'll start putting multiple departments together. So what I mean by that is, I basically, my first set of iterations was building a scrum team. I think I first called it a product manager. I had a front end and a back end developer. I had a QA, and I had a DevOps roles in there. And then I basically gave them a code base that was not super mature, but but there's working app in there, and gave it a feature and let it kind of go through it. And what I found was so you have to generate individual prompts for each one, so each agent knows, hey, this is my role, this is what I'm supposed to do. And what I found was, hey, if we use the most expensive model it will kind of get through it, but it burns a lot of tokens. And so I kind of went through all these different iterations of basically putting the same input in. I think I did something like 22 iterations over the course of a week. And sometimes it made it all the way through. Sometimes I had to stop and I had to poke it. Sometimes it the front end dev, I said the back end dev didn't match the specs for the API, and it went in a loop and wasted a bunch of tokens. So it was interesting. And I think probably the key insight I had was I called it a product manager, because I think of product manager kind of does some project management and some other things. But what I found was all the models are trained on the internet, so it knows all of the human roles really well. So I think I got to the aha moment for me was when I renamed the product manager to Scrum Master, because Scrum Masters are there to remove all the roadblocks and keep the team moving. A product manager is there to make sure the product is good, and they're really there to kind of hold things back until the product's acceptable. So that one key change in role, and some people had questioned me on LinkedIn, like, why is a Scrum Master? I'm like, well, you could have called it something else, but don't call it a product manager, because that was the wrong thing. So inherently what the LMs know about a product manager was not to keep the team moving. So I think a lot of that is kind of going back and figuring out, okay, what exactly in human teams play these roles, and what's the most precise description I can give of the role that will do the thing I want, which was I wanted that role to help resolve differences between the agents, try to solve problems and kind of keep the thing moving. So that was kind of where I started, and over 22 iterations, it started to get pretty smooth, reliable, and the code was actually half decent as well. Can't complain about that.
I think it's so interesting that you're taking human personas and applying them here. But Andy, I'll let you go, and we can talk a little bit more about that.
I've basically done a very similar thing. I think our approaches were a little bit different. So the idea of agent orchestration as a company is fairly new. I think 3-4 weeks, like pretty new. So we found this tool called Paperclip. It is one of probably many now that does this agent orchestration from a agent as a person perspective. And the cool thing is they have published I think it's companies.sh, where they've taken a bunch of agent frameworks as though a human is working with an LLM, and we have agents in there, and then they've given them skills. What I found in my testing is, all these popular people have published all their concepts around agents. They're generally from a human perspective, so front-end developer, back-end developer, database guy, but none of them actually worked. So like I would take all these configurations of people plus skills, put them into this tool, and all the glue that sits between them to make them work in this didn't work. So I had to figure out how to put the glue in the middle. But then, similar to Eric, I've gone through and run an iteration. So same input, building a 5-story thing versus a 40-story thing, but same input on different configurations, seeing how they perform, how long they take, how much poking you need. Does it actually produce a working thing? And I kind of got to a point where I've ended up in the same place that Eric has, where I have individual, very specific roles. So not just a front-end engineer, but a React engineer, not just a back-end engineer, but specifically a Node or a Python or pick some other language. So I've gone very granular to a point where I've defined a product organization, starting with a chief product officer and a chief technology officer. And those organizations have very specific roles. So giving inputs of ideas as to what the product is, the CEO or top level agent routes that request down the product org. They iterate on fleshing out those requirements so that they're ready for implementation, pass it back to the CTO. And it's actually quite amazing to watch, because it's just like, again, if you give them a very specific role, they know how to do that based on what the internet says that role is. And they coordinate with each other. They periodically get stuck. So I probably should add a Scrum Master. But it's fascinating because you can, by tweaking basically the agent definition a little bit, you're adding rules, or tweaking the skills, you're adding rules. You can get to a point where you have very vague requirements that come in. This is obviously the worst case scenario. What do you do with the worst case scenario? If that's good, you'll probably do better with a better case scenario. But it works. It follows architectural constraints. It follows TDD approaches. It's designed, and the output actually works. So, and then you maybe have like a couple bugs like you would with any human dev team. So then the approach is, how do we make it either go faster, not get stuck, produce something that works in a production environment, not blow out all your token subscriptions. And so it's more finding the efficiencies in those areas.
I want to go back to the greenfield, brownfield thing, because, a lot of people, I vibe coded this over the weekend, and that greenfield opportunity seems pretty, I don't know, I don't want to call it easy, but, something that people can learn quickly. But the brownfield problem is where I think we sit every day. And, how can we help guide the leaders of companies that are, 15, 20 years old, maybe even 10, and help them think about where they need to start? I think that is probably the hardest part. And as you said at the beginning of this, Eric, the levels, they're probably doing the basic level 1, level 2, but then how do we guide them with level 3 to 6?
You want me to start?
Me.
No, go ahead.
That's interesting, because a lot of the pieces that you'll need to really start to see the huge efficiencies for AI are also the same things you'd need for your humans to work well with the legacy code base. So if those practices like CI/CD, some of the automations aren't in place, or they can't go pull down the code and the developer can run it on a new machine and get it building without 3 days of installing stuff, then the AI is not going to be much more efficient than the humans, other than they can work all night and come back and maybe do it in 1 day instead of 3 days. It's definitely not a magic bullet, but if you've spent the time to have fairly decent practices for your engineering team, then I think you can start to kind of layer it in. But if not, you'd be doing the same thing as if you brought in some the best hires in the world for those roles. They're still going to have to come in and say, okay, here's some tech debt we've got to pay off in order to see the efficiencies of these super geniuses with zero experience, right? They can only do so much. So I think that's kind of knowing that you have to put some of the kind of pieces in place in order to see some of these efficiencies and start to get them rolling. I don't know. What do you think, Andy?
Well, I was going to say the first step is not to fire your super expensive, super experienced people, hoping that AI is going to solve these problems for you, which is kind of what we see. It's like, well, we'll just keep these people and they'll do amazing. We'll get rid of some large percentage of our existing engineering staff, and we'll still have the same throughput. The other part is brownfield and tech debt generally exist because your engineering team is not doing the right things. They're not updating your code base when new releases come out. They don't have testing frameworks in place. They don't generally have CI/CD in place, and like all the things that have been around for a long time and would generally be considered the norm. A lot of those norms are going away or changing or just not being implemented so that we can deliver more code. So it's interesting, because if you have one of those, you're probably also not ready to do what we're talking about in AI. I think there's still room for AI in that your existing team, who knows where all the dead bodies are buried in your code base, can drive AI as a tool to maybe get some of these things in place. That was one thing we didn't really cover, is if your team has never heard of CI/CD, well, it's cool. Claude knows how to do it with every tool. So pick a tool that's right with your code base, treat an LLM as your DevOps guy, and start putting some of these things in place without having to go research it and having to write every keystroke. You can leverage the knowledge of whatever tool you're using, and it will get it in place super fast. And then now you have some safeguards, and now you can start trusting AI a little bit more in those kludgy kind of environments where there probably are dead bodies and there probably is code you shouldn't touch because it's very brittle, and you can make a list of things to fix and then go fix it.
So fixing the fixing the challenges first is before you can even start to have that AI orchestration conversation.
Yeah, I think so. I think where I'm at least, using a company of agents. So either call it a one-person company, or I've also seen zero human company where all the agents are doing the jobs of humans. Well, if you just plop a bunch of agents on top of a code base that maybe doesn't operate in the way that the internet knowledge base would assume, and you don't have any tests in place, and you don't have anything safeguarding commits going to production, and there's a lot of room for error there. And so whether you're in greenfield or brownfield, again, you can do a lot vibe coding, but eventually your code base gets deep enough and broad enough that vibe coding will start exposing some of these problems where you'll start breaking things that work currently. And that's just a natural place to get to with lots of AI without these kind of constraints in place. But again, if you're a non-technical guy and you just learned what vibe coding is, you definitely don't know about unit testing and CI/CD and design patterns and all that stuff. So it depends on who you are as to your understanding of why I need those things.
Eric, anything to add?
No, that's well said. That's totally it.
Sorry, I'm just looking at my notes here. I wanted to, you actually teed me up well to talk about what an assessment of that would look like. But, if you are in these brownfield with, legacy code bases, what would you do on a Monday morning, for example, to kind of get things started? And what would you assess first?
Want me to go? To me, we still need people. And so we always start with technology assessments, team assessments, efficiency with your people. Because it's either the people at the bottom doing the thing maybe could be improved a little bit, or it's the people at the top driving fake emergencies or any number of things that keep the people at the bottom from doing the right thing. And somewhere in the middle of all that is the story, and it's probably a fuzzy story that needs a gray-haired person to come in and kind of see, what people, what tools, what processes, how many layers of management, like all those things, kind of figure that out for you.
So organizational design is really important for that beginning conversation. And both of you have been through so many changes in technology, and I should have started the conversation there, but what excites you the most about this moment that we're in? Because you have gone through the decades of it.
I mean, for me, and I've said this to other people, we've talked about this. For me, this is probably like one of the most exciting times in definitely the last 15, maybe since after I started coding for 5 years. I was really excited. Since then, we've seen very small incremental changes. Now, I will say this of, hey, I totally misjudged the iPhone. So I kind of missed that major. That was pretty major. And I was like, yeah, I don't know. It seems okay. I don't really understand how it'll change things. It changed everything, really. And I think, this is definitely kind of another one of those points where I think I started using Claude Code, I think a year ago when they first kind of came out with I don't even know if they called it a beta. It was like a prototype. And started to do some of those level 1 to level 2 things that we talked about earlier. But as soon as I started to go down the bigger things, it kept failing. Like it couldn't do a coding task for more than 10 seconds before it went sideways or messed something up. What we've seen the last year is, it can now go off for like 20, 30 minutes and it will come back with working, operating, results. So that part, now I definitely see it's possible. Now like Skynet is going to be possible to create now. A year ago, I was like, no, we don't have to worry. So I think that part's definitely really exciting to see, what we can build with it.
As long as conquering humans doesn't require math.
Yeah, we've had a lot of fun conversations internally about the math problem.
Yeah, it's I've been on a similar journey to what Eric is saying. I have not been in the state of staying up until 5 a.m. every single day until I can't do that. I haven't had that for probably 10 years, maybe. And I am definitely reinvigorated by this redefinition. AI has been around for a long time, but now if you ask, your mom or dad, AI is more this generative form. You log into a web page, you ask it about the weather, or give me movie choices or whatever. So it's replacing Google, it seems. It is definitely impacting software development, product development, but there are whole other industries that haven't felt this wave yet. And so there is like this massive wave that you can sit right in front of, or you can choose to keep your head in the sand and stay behind it. But for people who like to tinker and build, it's super exciting. The other dilemma with this is the last time this happened, it's like the front end wars, where every 6 months we had a new front end framework that we are going to use, and people had religious opinions about how this was better than that. Well, this is changing every week. There are new tools, new models. They're all competing against each other. So they're all, vying against OpenClaw is kind of a thing everybody's trying to chase. And being able to run your AI at home while you're at the mall off your phone or, whatever. So it's fun if your mind enjoys all that change. I can't imagine if you don't. It could probably be overwhelming.
Yeah, no, just for everybody's transparency, we have 4 different Slack channels just talking about this. And I think that the sharing and the enthusiasm between the team has been just super exciting to watch. And Eric, I think you and I were slacking about, your second brain build and how you're looking to create yourself all in one place so you don't have to remember things anymore.
Yeah. And it's certainly, not something I invented, but I've been the same way. I'm staying up late doing this stuff. I'm also scouring the internet. Previously, if this was blog posts, right, I'd read every blog post that came out. Now it's YouTube and all these other mediums. But, the idea of the second brain is, rather than relying on ChatGPT or Anthropic or a company to provide better memory to the chats, you start gathering and you take ownership over all of your information. I went so far as I went and downloaded the last 20 years of my Facebook data, my Google data, my Twitter data, and I'm having it starting to kind of go through all of that and kind of organize it. And it's crazy. It's crazy how much it knows about me, but I didn't send it up to the cloud. I did it all locally. And most of the work I did with local LLMs, so I could kind of at least keep it safe. But I don't think that's something normal people could do. You have to be a bit of a weirdo like me to have all this stuff working. But I see the concept, and I actually took that in the business context. We had like a whole bunch of documents for sales and biz dev. So I ran and I created a second brain around that. We had a similar thing around Evolve compliance. Well, actually, what happened is our COO looked at that and said, "That'd be amazing if I had that for all of our compliance and security data, because I get asked all these questions that I have to go research." So I definitely see applying this in the context of business having a huge value. And I think that's going to be one of the pieces that, as businesses start to scale up or mature in AI, they need to do some of the pre-work and really make sense of all the information that they have, all their data. So yeah. I love the concept of the second brain.
Right? Yeah. It's more than a knowledge base, though. Where knowledge base,
Well, it's like a local wiki is probably a good way to put it.
The best way to think of it, I was thinking about this, right? Before Google, right, we had Yahoo. And Yahoo was maintained by humans. It was a curated list of all the websites and all the pieces, and they cross-referenced everything. And the internet got too big where that just wasn't maintainable. But it's interesting because I leave all the data and the documents, they just live wherever they live, right? And they're unorganized OneDrives or Google Drives or mess. But I create a central place that kind of goes and scours them, brings them in. And the most interesting thing for me was it started, like for one of our clients, it looked through all the docs and it's like, hey, here's all these things that aren't in agreement with, it said, what we're going to do for them. So it actually surfaced up, all of the issues between and the inconsistencies between the documents. Was like, that's the intelligence we want. That's, I think, up till this point, kind of all these document store providers and all these systems that were going to help us. That's what we wanted, and now we get it with AI, and we don't actually have to go buy and install a system to do it. You can do it with, the tools that you can download off the internet now.
Yeah.
Awesome. Andy, you want to add to that?
No, I guess just to give people who are interested, if you look up Andre Karpathy, I believe it is, Obsidian is probably a tool that would be useful for folks to go create a second brain. But
awesome. We have about 10 minutes, but I wanted to address kind of what in a set, if a company were interested, how would we assess them? And you did talk about the orchestration of the teams, but what are some ways that a company, if they were interested, that we would be able to support them? One of the things, Andy, we're talking a lot about internally is how we can, work with companies in a way that is maybe more of a retainer-based system, so they can phase out their work. And we're even changing our approaches to clients. So what might be a way that a company might come to us and how we might be able to assess their needs right away?
And the easiest first step is to schedule a Zoom call and just have a free discovery. I love those conversations. We can hear pretty quickly what perceived problem they're having. And it doesn't take very long for us to come to actually your problem is a kind of situation. It just takes a conversation. And beyond that, usually there's some amount of information that somebody can share with us that they've documented their thoughts on. And after that, there's obviously a more formal discovery where we'd probably bring somebody like Eric or Simon in and start digging into code bases if it's a code related problem, dig into your accounting system if it's a numbers related problem or finance related problem. But it always starts with a conversation.
Yeah. Eric, what do you think?
No, I think it's really hearing, from the top level, what's the problem you're trying to solve and what's in your way, and eventually keep double clicking into all the bigger areas, and we get to, okay, yeah, it's either some technical issues or it's some organizational issues. But yeah, I think that part of figuring out where to use AI is also the same things you want to use or the approaches you'd use to, hey, what problems are you having in your business? Because hopefully it's not I want to use AI. It's we want to grow revenue, we want to be more efficient, like there's a driver
more of the money we make, like we're leaking profit all over the place.
Yeah, there should be some sort of business driver.
Yeah, I think that is the perfect bow here, is that it's not we want to use AI. It's that we are having this challenge, as you said, Andy. We're leaking this profit. We don't know. Our systems don't talk to each other. I think that it's so important that engineers have a business perspective and can communicate on both sides. We understand this is an engineering or technology problem, but this actually is. But let's first talk about your business problems or the market force problems that you're seeing that you're trying to abate.
But it's worth stating that while we're super excited about AI, and I probably lift the AI hammer super often, there's lots of problems in business that don't need AI. I know everybody wants to put it in somewhere. It could just be simple orchestration, automating some steps together, integrating some systems together, and there's no AI involved. Maybe we use AI to build the thing, but once you build the thing, it runs. So, and everybody wants AI, but we tend to try and figure out, okay, let's list out your problems. Let's actually understand why you have those problems. And then let's figure out which is the right one to solve first. And those are usually really easy things that you just have to take the time to work, in your business to orchestrate whatever it is and remove manual tasks or shore up things that are important to be done in a consistent manner. And a lot of times it's not AI.
Yeah. And it might be that the team you're working with, like meaning you, is using AI, but that doesn't mean that business needs an AI overlay right away.
Yes. May even be a dangerous first step.
Yeah.
And that's where we come in. I talked to lots of people at a coffee shop randomly about their business. It's like, oh, I heard this thing or I watched this YouTube video, and I'm like, yeah, don't do that. that will create a new set of problems for you. Let's do this other thing.
Gentlemen, this has been amazing. Thank you for the conversation. So we'll do this again in a month.
Cool. Thank you.
Awesome. Sounds fun.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.
Okay, bye for now.
All right. Have a good day.